Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Enroth. I'm the director of the University Core, and I'm really so excited about this evening. We have been planning this for a really long time, and it seems like the months just kind of flew by, and then here we are. We're ready to have this presentation, and it's important for lots of different reasons. Some of you if you're freshmen, and I know I see one of my students here who is a freshman, and probably many of the students here are, you know that you read, of course, Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson over the summer. Last year, our entering class did that as well, and we also had the privilege of having Bryan Stevenson himself come to campus, and that was a really important event. And this year, we wanted to do something a little bit different. We wanted to bring it closer to home and just show what's happening in our very neighborhood with the same kinds of issues that are talked about in the book. So I'm just going to mention the names of our panelists, and then I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Forrest Pritchett, he's been one of the main people involved with planning this, with the Core and with the law school, and he is going to be giving some introductory remarks, and he will also give closing remarks. Our panel consists of two gentlemen sitting here. Joe Russo, who is a first assistant public defender of New Jersey's Office of the Public Defender. And he works on many lifer cases and is the co-chair of the OPD Parole Project. And then Damon, am I saying that correctly?
Damon, yes.
Damon Venable, who was tried and convicted as an adult for a crime he committed at the age of 16. While challenging his sentence of life imprisonment, Mr. Venable was released on parole after serving more than 3 decades in prison, and he is now working as a paralegal for the Office of the Public Defender. Moderating the discussion will be Professor Jenny Brooke Condon, professor of law, who teaches constitutional law and directs the Equal Justice Clinic at Seton Hall Law School. It's been so much fun working with you. And our respondents, our faculty respondents, will be two people very, very close to my heart and close to the Core. Dr. Elizabeth Redwine, coordinator of Core 1, Journey of Transformation, and also a lecturer in the English department, my home department, and Sister Dr. Mary John Bosco Omakwe, who is an adjunct faculty member in the University Core, and also just a wonderful part of the Seton Hall community, because she's been teaching here for 11 years, first in communication and now in the Core. And they will be discussing, they'll be responding to the presentation, but also talking, in this context of how important it is in the classroom. And I just want to mention Professor Maribel Andrau, who has been just amazingly helpful in getting this whole thing off the ground. She's awesome in every way. So I turn it over to Reverend Pritchett.
Assume the position. Thank you, Dr. Enroth. Let me say to everyone, I bring you greetings on behalf of the Martin Luther King Leadership Program here at the university. And it's a pleasure on behalf of all that we represent to be with you today. I might point out when I was a student, like many of you in the room today, I remember tackling the issue of what we called then race relations and integration. And I remember one of our professors encouraging us to take a look at a manuscript and a piece of work that had been done by a Swedish economist. So I'm thinking, what does a Swedish economist have to do with understanding race relations in America? The book was entitled, ultimately, I'll say, The Economist came in, and what I did not know at the time was, at that point in time, it was the 1940s. He was being brought in because people wanted a very objective study of race relations in America. And they thought that there were no American social scientists who could render an objective study of race relations. How much of a parallel in time would that be? We compare then with now, meaning that there were no social scientists that others could trust to do an objective study of American race relations. Ultimately, Dr. Myrdal, Gunnar Myrdal was his name, released the findings of this magnum opus, this great work. He entitled it The American Dilemma. What he found was there was a major difference between the creed, which is the American Constitution, our Bill of Rights, how we guarantee freedom and justice and liberty for all. The difference he found was between the creed and the deed, how the American Negro was being treated. He projected also that if America does not change its major race relations patterns, that these patterns of systemic discrimination and racism would continue into the future. What a great dilemma. The world's richest nation cannot lead the world in the area of democracy, nor could it lead in the area of how we could teach people to get along. That paradigm has informed our methodology in race relations and in understanding what Michelle Alexander now calls the new Jim Crow. When America no longer has millions of people enslaved on plantations and count on that labor force, we find that as that enslaved population moves forward, the society itself, rather than guaranteeing freedom and the right to a good life, continues to re-enslave that members of that population at extreme numbers. We have the largest incarcerated population of all the industrial nations in the world today. So that we would hope that our interaction today will help to inspire not only the new generation of students, but the scholars who are present also. So without any further comments, let us begin.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you. I think I'll take it over from here and begin us in a conversation with Damon and Joe that can start to connect some of their experiences, firsthand experiences, lived experiences, with some of the themes in the book. And first I want to acknowledge, I think for everybody who's read the book, and thank you for reading the book, thank you for making it part of the core curriculum. You know that one of the themes that Bryan Stevenson makes in the book and all of his public remarks is the importance of proximity to human suffering and injustice as a way to inspire all of us to do our part to address it. And so for that reason, because of that idea of proximity, I really want to thank Damon for sharing his firsthand story, because it's not easy to do that. He doesn't have to do that. He has a job, he has family, he has loved ones that he could be spending time with and looking forward, rather than sharing his insights and reflections about what he's experienced. But he does that because he wants to enable us to engage in a proximate way, even for these 2 hours, with some of his experiences. And for that, we're really grateful. And Joe, too, because Joe sees, as a lawyer, the insides, the ins and outs of the suffering and the indignities of our criminal legal system. And I know firsthand that when lawyers take time out of their day to come and share their insights, the deadlines don't go away, the clients don't go away. They're still there. It's just that I know Joe's probably going to be working late tonight to meet all of his obligations. So I thank you as well, Joe. So my part in this conversation is really just to facilitate Joe and Damon to share their story and to tell us their perspectives. And I want Damon in particular to really tell us, about who he was, what led, to the crime, how he survived his experience of an extreme sentence, and what he has been doing now that he's been given a second chance. And so hopefully we'll get through all of that. I may ask Joe to comment and clarify on things that we're hearing from Damon, and then I'm going to turn to Joe and also ask him some of his thoughts about some of the ongoing and current issues in our criminal legal system. So Damon, if I could start with you, going back, you were convicted at 16 years old and tried and sentenced as an adult. If I could go back before that and the tragedy of the crime that occurred, that the killing, and ask you to tell us about who you were when you were in 16. What was going on in your life? Who were you?
Thank you. I'm still trying to unpack the details of my boyhood, right? And I just wrote a book about that, right? Which comes out in March, but that's something that I will forever have to reflect on and things of that nature. But, I pretty much got a bead on it. And my story is a typical story of, young black males, brown, growing up in, disadvantaged, poor working class neighborhoods, right? But, my situation, I came from a two-parent household. My mom used to say, we ain't got much, but we had a lot of love in the house, which was true. And, grew up with, Christian work ethic, values and things of that nature. But right outside that doorstep, right, was West Ward and North, 16th Avenue. Very violent, I was about 11 or 12 years old when I, witnessed my first person getting murdered, shot, right? And so, at that particular time, as a child, you're like, wow, like, but you don't understand, the gravity that is taken in, how it affects you, right? And so, let me fast forward some years. So, as I said, growing up in a very violent environment, a witnessing it, a callousness, not just myself, but callousness kind of grows within that young male, psyche, right? And so therein lied my problem. Violence became a very effective means of communication. I used to get bullied. My father and my brother, they were like, that's not going to happen. You're either going to fight, or you're going to come inside, you're going to fight us, and then you're going to go back outside and fight them. So what you want, 2 or 1, right? So I was good in school, so I chose the one option. But that being said, what it did was, it started the turning point, deformation from my authentic self. You know what I'm saying? I was a jovial kid, smile, I'd rather throw a joke than a punch, running, running from bullies, I wasn't embarrassed about it. But because, my family background and the stigma associated with being a coward, so I went head deep into the violent game. I wasn't going to talk, I was going to punch you in the face. My conflict resolution was set on violence, and it was escalating every year to the point I was 16. And I eventually started, encountering, thanks to I eventually started encountering weaponized violence, guns, knives, things of that nature. So it became very, popular and acceptable in my neighborhood to carry, dangerous weaponry, and therein lied my problem. And I just fell into that whole unfortunate landscape where I didn't care about myself, so I wouldn't care about the next person's life. And it's I often think about that time, and I just constantly think about what Pythagoras said. Man without education is a savage, and I embody that, and I'm so ashamed of that. And that I can reach a level in my life at 16 where I just didn't care about life itself. I remember wanting to go to the Marines, and things of that nature. I had plans, but the violence that I started encountering in the neighborhood, it just started getting like really, really intense. And so I often call it that it was like a war zone, really. So I started, I went to school just to check in and left out about like 10 o'clock. I mean, I was a good student. Learning came very easy for me. And so, yeah, it was at that point, I would say about the last 4 months of my life, I was really descended into an existential crisis. And for many of those who, are philosophically inclined, like that is something like typically adults, would experience, right? But, what I found is that, a lot of, black and brown, kids, because of the pressures, socioeconomic pressures and things of that nature, we experience like an existential crisis beyond our ability to like really grapple and deal with it. And so therein lies the, I think the source of some of my bad choices. And ultimately, carrying guns, one particular night, it wasn't planned. It was just, just riding around the car, joyriding, and it escalated to a murder, just like that. It wasn't planned. So, one of the things about, what we're going to touch on about the Miller factors is the impulsivity, the lack of, the lack of brain development and things of that nature, of executive functions in juveniles. And, a lot of us just embody that, those factors to the T, and that was my situation. Just an impulsive, one shot, pulling on the trigger. Unfortunately, it killed a very, very good individual. I mean, and I guess later on we definitely get into that. I don't want to take up all the time, give Joe an opportunity to speak, but the crime centered around juveniles, robbing other juveniles for trinkets, coats, jewelry or something like that, and a good individual intervened, and I pulled the trigger and shot him. And subsequently received 50 years of life in prison for it. And ultimately, the courts kind of, refashioned my sentence. And this is the crazy thing, real fast. So I received a 50 years life sentence, but my minimum was 30 to life sentence because Graves Act, right? He didn't set the mandatory minimum for the charges that he ran consecutive. But when the court sent it back for resentencing and say, hey, you have to correct that, he actually gave me another 5 years. Extended, so if I'd have left it on, I would have did 30 years. And that's important when we get into it, later on. But I'll leave it right there.
Thank you for sharing all of that and putting that in context about how you got to that point. I want to ask you about after the killing of Mr. Griffin, and you're 16 years old, and you're charged with murder and you're facing life. What's going through your mind while you're in a courtroom or while you're in the county jail, waiting to see what's going to happen, and how are you able to process it at that time?
I thought my situation was an anomaly, right? Meaning that at that particular time, I just didn't really understand the magnitude of what was going on. Like, I knew I did something extremely bad, but you don't know the court processes and, exposure, real-time exposure and stuff like that. So, and deep down inside, it's like, you're a good kid. I knew I was a good kid. I just made some terrible choices. And so I'm thinking, yes, I do need to be punished. And, I was ready to, give my, serve my sentence. But I was just so unaware that, I was ready to go home the next day. And the reason why I said I thought that was an anomaly is because the work I'm doing now, I get the opportunity to speak with young individuals, similarly situated as I was, waiting in the county jails. Like, I actually walk into county jails and detention facilities now, trying to mentor, young individual. And it's the same, unrealistic expectation of the future, and that they have, like, they want out, like, right now. Like, you can't see past. And so it's disturbing, but, I think that, I find a little hope in that because of my situation. You hear, situations where people say, we're trying to, steer these kids and things of that nature, but they say, Damon, like, you have a better positionality. You can come from them at from a context maybe they'll understand. And now I kind of understood it, but now in talking with them, I actually really get it, because I was there. And so some come around, but some is just their brains are still developing. And so what I say to that is, you have to have an amazing support system. You just can't lock a kid up and just, okay, we incapacitated you. You have to provide them, with the resources, to, kind of trigger that goodness in them, that intelligence, that capacity for education, and, and introduce them to, allow them to be introduced into their best selves. So just, locking the individual up. I was just locked up. Like, at that particular time, it was, like an archaic period. Like, they, when I eventually got waved up and I was with, in county jail, ostensibly what they did was, you had the juvenile floor, but it was adults running around there, like in the law libraries, like we was, it was really no segregation, and us being really vulnerable. Unfortunately, my violence escalated the first 10 years of my imprisonment because they threw me in with adults. You know, and look at my picture, I was baby faced, and things of that nature. So, unfortunately, yeah, so I kind of missed my point there, but I hope I made it.
I want to just pull in Joe for a minute here, because Damon said he was waived up to adult. He was tried as an adult, and he was sentenced as an adult, kept in maximum security prison with adults. How common is that, and does that still happen in New Jersey?
Sure. Well, first I want to say, give a little quick disclaimer that my views aren't necessarily the views of the Office of Public Defender. They're my own personal views. Well, but I do have a lot of personal views that I want to share today. The other thing I want to say real quickly before I get the question is I want to follow up on what the Reverend said. And when you were talking, what came in my mind is my favorite Martin Luther King quote, and that is, all we ask of America is to be true to what you said on paper. And I deal with constitutional issues every day, and that really resonated with me. But in terms of waivers, waiver decisions made by prosecutors now, I think, are much more informed. Waivers have decreased around the state, tremendously decreased. They still occur in certain counties. There's not a lot of uniformity. But the problem that we all have is at the time of the waiver decision, I don't think the Miller factors, which Damon briefly discussed on, are truly considered in any type of in-depth way. But many of our attorneys will get expert reports going over the Miller factors. So after the motion for waivers filed, before there's a waiver hearing, we have the ability to retain an expert in many cases, submit that expert report to the prosecution for consideration, and we take a look at things like the maturity of the juvenile's failure to appreciate risks and consequences of their conduct because they were so young when they committed a crime, they were a child, their family and home environment, their peer pressure, and their real inability to deal with the criminal justice system, with police officers, with prosecutors, and even with their own attorneys. And we also look, of course, at rehabilitation. What's the prospect for rehabilitation? Is this crime the product of transient immaturity, or is it the product of permanent incorrigibility? Can there be redemption with this individual? And the thing is, you can't really make that determination oftentimes at that age. And all of the research shows, the research of Mark Maurer, and actually our Sentencing Commission, the New Jersey Sentencing Commission, where there's unanimity regarding having a look back provision to the murder statute. Right now, Damon talked about the statute regarding murder. Right now, if you're convicted of murder, you must at a minimum do 30 years. That's 30 to 30. You don't get parole off of the 30 years. And what happened with the Sentencing Commission and with the research, the peer-reviewed research of Mark Maurer and many others in the field, they say, listen, at the time of sentencing, even if an individual is waived from juvenile court to adult court, at the time of sentencing, no one in that courtroom, no one knows the prosecutor, the judge, the public defender, the defense attorney, everybody involved in the criminal justice system, no one knows what this person is going to be like 20 years later. No one. You can't predict it oftentimes. You have experts to take a look at it, but you oftentimes can't predict it. And some of the individuals, in my experience, with lifers, who have committed the most heinous crimes are capable of redemption and rehabilitation. And the data shows that after 20 years, 95% or more individuals who are waived up to adult court as juveniles and are serving lengthy state prison sentences are rehabilitated and ready to rejoin society, capable of having productive lives. That's why our Supreme Court in State versus Comer, which Alicia wrote the brief and I argued before the Supreme Court. Alicia did a brilliant job. Alicia Hubbard here is our point person for lifer cases around the state of New Jersey. She does brilliant work. But that's why in State versus Comer, the court ruled, we're not going to wait for the legislature anymore. In order to save this statute from being declared unconstitutional under cruel and unusual punishment grounds, we're going to have a look-back provision. Because most juveniles, the data shows, age out of crime, are capable of redemption and capable of hope. And that's what Just Mercy is all about. It's about hope. It's about redemption. It's about we're all better than the worst thing we've ever done. And it's so beautiful because I looked at the Seton Hall, you know, a lot of you are freshman students and a lot of people are, I guess, appearing virtually here. But I looked at the Seton Hall website real quickly. And it seems like Just Mercy is really aligned with your mission statement, at least part of the mission statement. It says Seton Hall stands ready to defend the weak, the vulnerable, and the despised. Well, Mr. Damon Venable is one of those despised individuals. And here he is. Here he is, center stage. I mean, you know, hopefully I answered the question. Hopefully I answered the question, but this stuff is powerful. You know, I walk into state prisons along with Alicia and now Damon, my colleague. Proud to call you my colleague, Damon.
Proud to.
He does great work for us. But I walk into state prisons all around the state, going to see lifers. I walk in, no cell phone. I hear the doors shutting behind me. The next row of doors, the next, you know, you go through 6 or 7, you hear the clinging and the clanging of the doors, and you hear people's footsteps walking down the corridors. But within that setting, there's hope, there's redemption, there's rehabilitation, and we can never give up on any one of our brothers or sisters. I think that's the message of Just Mercy, and I think that's one of the missions of the school.
Thank you, Joe. Damon, I want to go back to you for a minute. You know, we're talking about redemption and rehabilitation and what it takes for a person that's been written off by our legal system and our laws and treated as if they're incorrigible to persevere when they're, you know, locked up with people much older than them and looking at a life sentence. How did you survive, and how did you come out on the other end and stand as the person you are today, trying to use your talents and your intelligence to help other people?
I mean, that's a subject for a whole other discussion. But I'm gonna try to I'll try to sum it up. You know, I've learned that, you know, prison has both reformative and, you know, deformative you know, properties and dynamics, right? And you know, as an individual, you know, we make choices, right? And so, you know, individual, you know, you can make choices in your life that obviously will reform you, and you can make choices that, you know, can make you descend towards, you know, a dark place. The Reverend spoke about Michelle Alexander, and you know, with respect to, you know, mass incarceration, I think the section that she speaks about is about transformation without reformation, right? How it's just, you know, we went from slavery to Jim Crow to mass incarceration, right? And so I say all that to say is, you know, when I didn't have the luxury, right, of going to a youth reformatory. He sent me to, you know, New Jersey State Prison, Trenton, right? And this was 1987, right? And if anybody's familiar with Gresham Sykes, who wrote the Society of Captives, right? He came up with the theory of pains of imprisonment, and he did a study based off of Trenton. It was very, very violent, all right? Let me say that again. It was very, very violent. And so I came into that environment as an 18-year-old. And, but let me say this, is that, you know, and I love existentialism because, you know, it says that, you know, life is what it is and it's not what it is, right? Meaning that inside those walls, you know, you had predators, but also you had like God-fearing men that wanted to pour it into you, like help you, right? One of them is here in support of you. And so I say that it comes down to choice, but it comes down to, you know, your family support. So I got it. I ain't gonna cry. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you'll watch it, right?
No, you're gonna make us cry.
Oh, yeah, I am not afraid of being vulnerable. That's actually my strength, you know. But I say this, is that what really helped me out was my family support. Like, they did not give up on me. And I shudder to think, you know, how my life would have turned had, you know, had he just said, hey, you know, my mom said, you know, you're still a big brother. So, my familiar ties kept me tethered, right? So, got it. All right. So my familiar ties kept me, you know, tethered, not just to the outside, but kept me tethered to my own humanity, right? And like, you know, Joe reminded us, like, hope is a very, very powerful thing. Like, and you know, we all know that. Like, I read a lot, but you know, hope had come into the world to give man, like, you know, inspiration. You know, through mythology, Prometheus and Epimetheus, you know, so, you know, that whole thing, right? So hope is a very powerful thing, and I always had it, because I always believed that, you know, Jamie, I was a good kid, I just made some terrible choices. And so, so navigating through that prison environment, like I said, the first 10 years of my incarceration, I was an extremely very violent individual, right? I thought I had to be that, you know, when I really didn't. I was really fearful, like most young black males, you know, just being kicked around by the system and stuff like that, you know, you masking your fear. So I walked around with a mask, and, you know, meeting individuals, men who, you know, who saw some goodness in me, took the time, you know, to, you know, be what we call, like, you know, prison dads. You know, I mean, we had, you know, coming in as 18 and 19-year-olds, you know, we had surrogate, you know, uncles and prison dads and grandfathers that, you know, taught us how to be men. You know, the choice was yours. You know, you can go on that side, do the drugs and the other, you know, abominable things that go on in prison, or, you know, you can take the self-righteous path. Find your authentic self. You know, find your self-actualizing self. You know, and so I read a lot. I became a voracious reader, and one of my, you know, monumental heroes is Frederick Douglass. So to answer your question, Jenny, I have to say that, you know, the reason why I survived, you know, my incarceration under these circumstances was because of a 5'2", devout Christian woman who never had a prison record or encounter with the law, lived a sheltered life, but gave me some advice that, just, you know, helped me navigate, you know, the Hades of this modern day age, which is prison. My mom, you know, my mom, you know, she, her support, and I would just like to end with this also too. And Joe spoke about, you know, going inside the prisons, right? And as I said, you know, I'm a voracious reader, and reading helped me. It really helped me stay afloat, you know, and not descend to my worst self, because, you know, storytelling ennobles us. It shows us, it gives us options. Like it helps you, you know, it gives you choices and how to become, because we're always in a state of becoming, right? And so I say this is that, like I said, my first 10 years, you know, very violent, but I realized that that microcosm of prison, that I didn't have enough examples of men. You know, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King spoke about, you know, gravitating towards people that you can emulate from, you know, steal their quality, like, you know, stuff like that. And so I realized early, like, I was like, wow, if I keep going down this road, you know, the prison is not going to allow me to, like, you know, participate in prison justice ministries, right? Where volunteers come in, right? Or educators come in and stuff like that. So I told myself, I said, I need to be exposed to as many good people as I possibly can, so I can steal those qualities, learn how to be human. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of a shifting point too. And so, you know, I just started enrolling in, like, you know, substance abuse programs, and just whatever programs, you know, Catholicism classes, Buddhist classes, like everything. I just wanted to see volunteers. I just wanted to see, you know, how people, you know, different varieties of people. And so that actually helped me out too.
And you just didn't do those things, you really absorbed it all and
Right.
applied it, and you eventually got your college degree. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, so and in the 80s, as.
Don't be humble now.
Yeah,
You
nah.
graduated summa cum laude. Don't be humble. Summa cum laude.
So, you know, with the prison, Tough on Crime course, they took the Pell Grants from prisoners, right? We couldn't go to college in Pell Grants, so they essentially like college education had stopped in prisons in the 80s almost, unless you paid for their correspondence course. And I remember being real angry because I came down so young, and they kind of, in training, they kind of like say, you're not working, you're going to school, right? And so the teachers was like, well, hurry up and get your GED, you can go to college, you know what I'm saying? But the following years and stuff like that, they took it. And I remember being really angry about that, you know what I'm saying? Because I wanted to test myself. So anyway, fast forward, they brought New Jersey Scholastic Transformative Education in prison, right? You had schools like Rutgers, Drew, just some elite colleges, Princeton, coming in. And, I had a chip on my shoulder as a kid, right? And so I just kind of like changed the frequency a little bit. And I put a chip on my shoulder as far as like academically and intellectually. And man, I was like, whatever class I'm going in, I'm going to be the top dog. Like, right? I graduated Rutgers School of Criminal Justice while I'm still inside, social justice, degree in, BA in Justice Studies, summa cum laude 4.0. That's one of my, prominent achievements that have done that in that environment. And listen, it came from the help of what we call, Team Work Hard. It was a cohort of us, that we really pushed each other, and we was like, hey, like, if not all of us, we're going to show the world, like, you threw us away, we got chips on our shoulder. You threw us away, we're going to show you that, we're not, who you thought we was, who you said we was, so we put chips on our shoulder. It's not just me, I represent a cohort of individuals, and, we call ourselves Team Work Hard. They're out here doing some amazing things. There's many more of us behind bars, and this is why I'm so happy to, be a part of your Public Defender's Office, where we are actively, working towards, Zuba, coma hearings, giving people second chance and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I want to make sure I reserve time for other members of the panel
Absolutely.
to comment, but you both mentioned Miller, and I just want to make sure everybody here knows what that refers to. That's Miller versus Alabama, which was a 2012 decision by the U.S. Supreme Court that was litigated by Brian Stevenson. He did the oral argument. And Joe, could you tell us a little bit more about what Miller means and why that's a continuing source of hope and potential for so many young people who are convicted of serious crimes and sentenced to extreme sentences?
Sure. Well, Miller was a major case because the United States Supreme Court, I don't know if they would rule that way today, but in 2012, the United States Supreme Court ruled that sentencing juveniles to mandatory life without parole is basically unconstitutional under the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. But the beautiful thing about practicing law in New Jersey is oftentimes our New Jersey Supreme Court will go farther and give us more constitutional rights under our state constitution than provided under the federal constitution. In the state v. Zuber and the state v. Comer, our Chief Justice and our Supreme Court went much farther than the Supreme Court in Miller, and said, after 30 years in New Jersey, if after 30 years of serving a sentence on a murder charge, you sentenced a mandatory 30 to life, like 30, that after 20 years you can get a look-back hearing. And I want you to think about Damon's case for one moment. If State v. Comer had been decided 20 years ago, Damon would have had 15 more years on the street. Because remember, he talked about all his anger, all his acting out in prison. The juvenile brain isn't mature until age 25 or 26, and if you throw in trauma in addiction. Sometimes it's into the 30s. But as a general rule, all the neuropsychologists and neurologists say that the brain does not stop maturing until about 25 or 26. Damon was 16. We had people waived up in the old days at 14. They ruled that was unconstitutional, but our Supreme Court did not apply it retroactively. We are actively representing an individual who's been in prison since he was 14 years old. 14 years old. Think about that. So Comer is a watershed case authored by our Chief Justice giving us greater rights under state constitution, which means you get a look-back hearing, a Comer hearing, after serving 20 years in prison, and you can show that you've been rehabilitated, that you're not permanently corrupt, and that you're capable of reform and redemption and rehabilitation. Back to Damon, if Comer was around again, he could have been out 15 years earlier, which means, Damon, he could have been with his mother, who died, I think, about 5 years before you were released? About 3 years before he was released. So, you know, you talk about time in prison, but I was talking to Mr. Henshaw, I believe it is, right? Antoine Hayes. Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry. Mr. Hayes, right before, I apologize, Mr. Hayes. And Mr. Hayes said I could talk about it, but Mr. Hayes served time with Damon. He's here to see Damon. He was a lifer who got out after, 35 years?
32 years, 6 months, and 5 days.
They always know the exact
And
amount.
that was 18 years ago.
Yeah, so just pause there for 1 second. Just pause. We're in a 4x6 cell. 4x6 cell for over 3 decades. Over 3 decades. But, you know, there's redemption inside prison, and Damon talked about getting his degree. It's the one-step program. It's at East Jersey State Prison. I wish it was at every state prison. It's not. It's about 3 or 4 of our state prisons. But the one-step program, maybe Seton Hall could get involved at some point. That's a little pitch. But it's an incredible program because all the data shows that the rate of recidivism is decreased somewhere between 76 and 90% with a 4-year degree. Is that?
New Jersey stuff.
New Jersey stuff. Thank you. This is why he's our paralegal. Thank you for correcting me. That's how we had David on board. But, you know, New Jersey STEP program is an incredible program. And, you know, the recidivism rates markedly decrease with a 4-year degree. With a master's degree, it goes to 96% reduction in recidivism and only a 4% rate of recidivism with a master's degree. So education is really critical, and the New Jersey STEP program has been phenomenal. I don't know, Jenny Brooke, if I can get into briefly how I met Damon.
Please, yep.
So, you know, how did I meet Damon? How did he come on board to the Office of the Public Defender? Well, I went to, when I ran the Hudson Trial Region for about 7 years, and then I was asked to take over the statewide appellate section, all right? And I was there for 4 years. And when I was there, I thought to myself, you know, I think our attorneys who are rarely in state prisons, because we deal with the cold, hard record on appeals, not trial, I think our attorneys should go to a lifer group. So I worked it out with the administrator, the so-called warden, to get our attorneys to go to a lifer group. I guess it's a takeoff from the Scared Straight program from decades ago.
Exactly the same group.
Was it the same group?
Same
group?
organization.
Same organization. So it's an elite group chosen by the lifers inside the prison, and there were 6 or 7 who were there. And first we got a tour of the prison, and then we had a Q&A with the lifers. And it was eye-opening, and Damon was one of those lifers. And I sat there after Damon spoke, and I said, this is incredible. This individual should have been out of prison like a couple of decades ago. Why is he still in prison, you know? And but he struck me as being extremely bright, as you saw today, extremely articulate, extremely intelligent. And at that moment, I said to myself, one day, I had the vision Damon was going to be working for us at the Office of the Public Defender. And kudos to our public defender, who did not hesitate when I brought it to his attention. I said, I think we should hire Damon to work with our parole project and work with our lifers. There was no hesitation. He said, I think it's a great idea. But of course, we had to take a look at his resume. And his resume is rather incredible. So the first time I went to the lifer group, I asked our appellate lawyers, it was voluntary, it wasn't mandatory. And it was so moving to me. It was so life-changing to me that I mandated it for the rest of our lawyers. And so I had a chance to go to the lifer group on 2 occasions, and both times Damon, as well as the others, but Damon especially stood out And I'm proud to say he's part of the Public Defender Lifer Group and part of the Public Defender Parole Project, and he's doing incredible work. Our fellow lawyers rely upon him on a regular basis. Alicia Hubbard relies upon him on a regular basis, and even our own public defender, who's still handling cases, has relied upon Damon in certain cases. So it's just been an amazing journey having Damon on board, and it's the epitome of really just mercy.
Damon, if we could just conclude before we hear from our panelists. Joe has really told us about his vision of what Just Mercy means for him as an attorney. How do you think about that? I know you've read the book maybe a couple times. How do you think about Just Mercy and your own experiences?
Wow. So I remember, while I was doing the New Jersey, doing my college courses, one of the professors, it was required to read. And during the curriculum, they say, read chapters 1 to 2 this week and next week. So it's probably like maybe a 6-week process to read it. But like I said, me and my cohorts, like as soon as we got the book, the day after was maybe Saturday, we all in the yard, just we really done read it, chopping it up, philosophizing, this is what we're going to talk about. So, but for me, I think you touched on it. Talk about proximity, right? And so the very things that he was talking about, the people that he was talking about, like I was paralegal in prison for 25 years, and once I perfected an understanding of the legal system, how to navigate filings and stuff like that, I couldn't just do it for myself, right? So I started helping other people, and then and in doing that, you going through their paperwork and stuff like that, and talking with people and stuff. And so, I just have like in my head like countless, stories, such as Brian Stevenson. So, and mine was, he was free, doing that, right? But I'm inside, so it was kind of a kinship there, because I think he graduated with a philosophy degree, but he was like, hey, what you gonna do with that, right? So he's like, what you gonna do with the philosophy degree? And so he went and got his law degree, and me being an avid reader, I actually wanted a degree in philosophy, because I just love it. But so I found a kinship, with this man. But ultimately, to answer your question, it's just, if you're going to be an advocate for justice, if you really have to, get close to the people. Like, you really have to, tie your boots up, and get dirty. Like, come into those walls. So for me, I'll speak about, prison being Hades, right? And in mythology, there's very few characters who were able to go into Hades and come out, right? And so these individuals are held in very high esteem in Greek mythology, right? Hercules, he went into Hades and came up out of there. I think the guy Morpheus, one of them anyway. But the point is that, for those who, were in the world, going into a decadent, evil place for the purposes of justice, right, were held in high esteem. And so, for a lot of us in prison, like, we understand that mythological dynamic. Like, so when individuals are coming and advocating for us, from a really heartfelt, passionate sense, that invigorates us. So where there's once a little, little hope, just seeing individuals, very passionate about justice. Like, I met a sister one time, prison justice ministry. I told her my story, and she just bust out crying. Like, so yeah. Right. So, but the point is that I believe, and we all touched on it, that you're really going to be an advocate for justice. Meet the people that who are suffering. really. I think that will invigorate you, empower you, and just, bring you close to your own humanity, in a sense, so.
Thank you so much, and we're going to have some commentary.
I just want to begin by thanking you from the bottom of my heart for coming and speaking to us tonight. And I've learned so much, and I had a feeling. I said to Nancy and Sister Vasco and Jennifer, I'm going to be speaking about how I teach this book, even though I had a feeling, and I was right, that I'm not going to be teaching this book in a completely different way. Looking at some of my students, like, this experience has already opened up my eyes and changed the way that I'll teach this book. So I'm so grateful to all of you, but I'm especially grateful to you, Damon, because, and I said this to my students, I said, this is going to be an event where it's a lot to ask someone to come be vulnerable and share their experience. I just cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate this. And I know my students appreciate it, and my colleagues, and we're going to be talking about this for a long time. This has really been a life-changing event. So, reading this book changes you, and then hearing firsthand from someone changes you again. And when your book comes out, I'm going to teach it. So let me go. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to teach it. So keep for sure. I can already, I'll be sharing the video of this with my students, the ones just to review it. And
You better give me a free copy.
well, we should have a signing event. But,
We will. I might ask you to write a piece of the forward.
well, we just decided that we're going to have a book signing event. So definitely, yeah, definitely. And just, I'm so inspired just as someone who's a reader and I feel like a shot in the arm for being an English professor. So thank you for that. Like when you said, find your authentic self, because my students know, we talk in the English classes and in the core classes about what does it mean to be an educated person? Why do we take these classes? You want to be a nurse, or you want to, be a psychiatrist, or you want to be a banker. So why are you reading Just Mercy? Why are you reading Plato? Why are you reading Dr. King? Now, we know why, but it's so important to have these forms of education that aren't just about, the bottom line. So I just appreciate you saying that about finding your authentic self. That just helps me understand the importance of a class like Journey. I wrote down all these really important, and storytelling ennobles us. I'm going to be talking to all my classes about that tomorrow. And you said it gives you choices and how to become. So I'm so grateful for all of that. And especially at this point in the semester where we got a few more weeks left and everybody's grinding and it's getting cold out, I just feel really inspired. So I'm very, very grateful, and I'm really looking forward to your book. So the class that I teach, I teach some English department classes, but the class where we read Just Mercy is, because I'm not teaching first year English this semester, I'm teaching Journey of Transformation. And in that class, it so pertains to everything that you've been talking about, your own transformation, which is why I want your own book to be one that we read as well. But I tell the students, and some of them are here today, you come to Seton Hall as a first year, and I know some are watching online. Hi, Sean, hi, everybody. You come to college, you come to Seton Hall, you were raised in a certain family, community, neighborhood, and I'm just asking you to kind of put on each of these books and walk around in it for a little bit, see what you're going to keep, see what you're going to leave, see from your background what you're going to keep, what maybe you're going to question. And I tell them, nobody's telling you what to think. You're just going to try on Plato, try on Brian Stevenson, walk around a little bit, see how it feels. And, this book is so challenging for so many of my students because, and I am embarrassed, I went to a lot of school. I had no understanding really of a lot of the information in this book until I read it. So for my students, it really opens their eyes and challenges them around what are their goals for their lives? What kind of a society do we want to live in? How can I contribute to making this society more what I want it to be? And we talk a lot about what many of us see in the surrounding culture about what success means. And unfortunately, you know, I'm not even like mad at any of us, because there's corporations that get these algorithms going where every time you try to get information on your phone, you've got a million different ads that are specially curated for you, that are making you want certain things, and then you feel like you have to have like a certain kind of job to get those things, and it all becomes very individualistic and pulls us away from that authentic self you mentioned, and from our communities, and from proximity and the hope that Bryan Stevenson speaks about. So I graded a series of papers a couple weeks ago, and a lot of my students wrote about Just Mercy. It was one of the texts they could write about. Some of them wrote about Allegory of the Cave. I know you're a philosophy person, so I have to mention that. And, you know, these uncomfortable experiences of learning. You know, this isn't a book that you just read and then you sleep great at night. You know, you're like lying there thinking like, what can I do? You know, especially around like Charlie, the 14-year-old, you know, what he goes through, which speaks to your own experience. Devastating. And, you know, I was rereading it, for like the third time now over the weekend. And it's funny how one of the things Bryan Stevenson talks about is retaining our hope. And I think one way that we do that is it's easy to forget the stories that don't end well. Every time I reread it, I almost realize that I purposely put out of my mind, like, I think his name is Herbert at the beginning, who doesn't make it, you know, and Bryan Stevenson does everything he can. But, I mean, that's the thing about nonfiction, too, is you're like, oh, I wish it ended different. I wish that specific story, that's the first person we meet. I'm rereading it this weekend. Wow, I'd kind of forgotten that piece of it. So this book really changes the way my students think about their own lives, their education, our country's history. One of the many reasons why your visit is so particularly important to my students and to me, and I know to my colleagues, is just because of Bryan Stevenson's experience. Most of this book does take place in the American South, and there's so much interesting history around that. I think having someone who's been in this state, you know, grew up nearby, went to, you know, experience some of the colleges that and I'd love to see a program like that with Seton Hall, but that we've heard of, and was imprisoned not too far from where we are. I think that's a real wake-up call for our students and for our community and our colleagues, because when we think about proximity, we know I went to school in Atlanta. If I were reading this in Atlanta, it lands different than when you're reading it from far away. So I think having that connection to our own state and hearing the specifics about the different cases that have changed things, I think that's really helpful. I do teach, all my sections are service learning sections, so the students go perform, work in the community in service in a volunteer basis, and then come back and write about the text and connecting it to their own experiences in service learning. So I'd love to talk to the person, Professor Hoffman, who runs service learning, about working with incarcerated people. We already do. There's a lot of letter writing, but I'm sure there's more ways that we can expand that. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to walk into the class tomorrow. You know, we're reading Dante tomorrow, and you're talking about traveling through Hades, and it's just like exactly. I like my class prep is done. You know, like I'm done. I'm just going to introduce by your experience, and it's not far away.
We're out of purgatory today.
Right? Yeah, I know. So I just appreciate it so much. And then the last thing I want to say, because I didn't look when I started talking, so I don't know how much time I have left. I love the team work hard. I love changing, because I think a lot of times people feel locked in to the way they've lived so far, even if they're 18, 17. So I love the changing the frequency, you said, changing the frequency, as much as you got wrapped up in kind of negative violence, then getting that wrapped up in schoolwork and in learning and expanding your ideas is just such a cool way to think about it. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is just me getting into uncomfortable space, as Brian Stevenson says, and trying to have hope. Like I think Desmond Tutu spoke about looking at what's happening upstream. Like, and I don't have the answer, so I'm just like throwing out this question, which is how do we deal with these issues of violence and people feeling like they have no choice to survive, but being wrapped up in violence. And I don't have the answer to that. And then the last question I'll end with is just what would you like us as educators to kind of make sure our students understand? And so those are my kind of last questions. Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of you for coming here, all of you, and to my colleagues for kind of getting this ball rolling, and to Jenny Book for all that she does. Thank you, Nancy, and Sister Bosco, Reverend Maribel, too. Thank you so much.
I'm still crying, but I will. So, taking off from what everybody has said, when the book was introduced, that was last year as the reading text for the university. So I picked it up, I read, and like reading like you. I read it and I kind of meditated. I said, this is somebody that is still alive, young, still working in the system. Why not me bring him to the classroom? Because we read Plato, we read Augustine, we read Justin, and these people we are living, they are all defenders. That's why we talk about apology of Justin, apology of this person. I said, but we have somebody that is kind of an embodiment of all these old texts that I can bring real to my students. So that's how I brought him when I thought that was Johnny last year. I introduced him in my Johnny class, and my students, like me, they fell in love with the text because, and they will tell me when we do class discussion, they tell me it's like you are touching the cases. Like the old text we read, Justin, Dante, and all that, it's like it's boring. That this lifts them up. So that was in Johnny class. And at least I think we read almost, or I did the introduction with them, then I assigned the chapters. And I think we got up to chapter 8 before the semester, that semester. Then, with that enthusiasm I found with my students and their love for the text, I replicated something in Core 2. I brought it also to Christianity and culture while I was doing my own independent research about him, because from especially the time he was here in November, I fell in love with him. His personality, everything. He's an embodiment of all that we need in our young people and in everybody in America. So I replicated something in my CCD class. And even this semester, I didn't teach it. The students are still writing their papers on the text. Even when it is not the major, like the paper I'm grading now, I told them, you are choosing an author from the syllabus. But I didn't teach him, we don't have him, but I have 3 students who chose this book as their main text. Because the same reason, because I will ask them, why do you choose that author? Why is the author your hero? And everybody will say the same thing about him, because they feel like he's alive and they feel what he is discussing. And that is why I love him. And I want us to talk more about the book, but going a little bit maybe beyond or after him. My question and the remark is, like Elizabeth touched on it, what can we do pre-prison period And the center, yeah, the name St. John Bosco has what he introduced that is called preventive system, which he said is based on handling the young people, based on reason, religion, and love and kindness, which Brian called proximity. But I am going a little bit further in expanding those ideas. I am saying, what do we do from the family? And St. John Bosco has the phrase, catch them young. So what do we do from, and designing programs, what do we do? We start being close to families that are troubled in their process of raising their kids. How do we get involved earlier before they get to that point of being incarcerated? So what do we do? What programs, how can we get them, reach them younger?
It's a good question. Two things. You're a literary, you're an English teacher. So I'm thinking about one of my Rutgers English teachers, Leah Tuxson. I thought I could write, till I went to college. Yeah, I thought I could write. I used to write. Me and my moms, we used to, write each other a lot. I was an avid reader. So when I went to college, they said, you had to write, scholar. And so I just want to, shout out Mia because I know she's listening. But I say all that to say to you, sister. I remember, like I said, I read a lot, and but what really impacted me, what really changed me in terms of text was the authors of the Black Renaissance, like Richard Wright. Like I want to be Richard Wright, in terms of like his authorial power. I read Black Boy and I was like, why didn't I get this in school? Like, why didn't somebody give me this book? I read James Baldwin, like, why didn't somebody give me that? I can't look back and say that would have been like the turning point, of my life, right? But I think about Paulo Freire, and going with the whole, the banking model of education, the whole rote memorization, and what Freire touches on, as is about, we have to teach kids, we have to teach, to think, aesthetic judgments, teach them in a way in which they can, respond back in an aesthetic way, a judgment way, instead of just, some rote memorization of what somebody said. And so, I always think back to where, I was, like I said, school always came easy for me, but recalling, I did not have like a judgment. I did not have an education in terms of like being able to like weigh different valuations, judgments, and things of that nature. I knew syntax at an early age. I was in 7th grade, probably reading on the 10th grade level, something like that. But I didn't have I didn't have an education, if that makes sense. And so that affected my ability to kind of like discriminate in terms of a good way, like, good from wrong and stuff like that, or just have the willpower, the forward thinking capacity. So to your point, sister, it's something very simple. It takes a village, right? Because my mom and pop were young parents. And so when I say it takes a village to raise, is that aunt, who has the education, or that pastor, or that football coach, or the mechanic on the block, like it's a culmination of everybody, that raises the child. And so, the best thing I can do is say is that, children must be acquainted with relatable stories. So that's why I say the Black Renaissance for me was a really pivotal point in my life, because, in reading it spoke about, it helped me define and explain like my own turmoil and tumult and experiences and stuff like that. And so, and they Richard Wright, James Baldwin, they wrote from a perspective in which they kind of helped me see, why violence, became an acceptable means for me. Like why I gravitated towards that, and so so that helped me start unpacking, and my life, but also in a way in which it allowed me to recondition myself. I think Gramsci talks about the ideological prescriptions that comes down, from we live in a hierarchical structure. We live in a paternalistic, sexist, racist order, right? And so even though people of color and the formerly marginalized, have jobs, in state institutions and things of that nature, making strides, but if you still have that paternalistic, sexist, racist order ideology seeping in your thoughts, you're just going to perpetuate a traditional system of oppression. And so so what I try to do is I try to use my story to make people look in the mirror and like, what are you doing? Are you in fact, being liberated, or are you incarcerated? Because how you look at the world determines whether or not you're liberated or incarcerated. If you're liberated, you're going to free other people. But if you're incarcerated, you're going to incarcerate them. So to answer your point, sister, I wish I had a bona fide solution, but I don't. It really takes a village to try to intercede in the lives of young folks before they, hit that, incarcerated space.
Yeah, that's one of the things I tell my students. Design your program before you graduate. Pick up, just decide you get one person out of the street before the end of your life. So I tell them that we are training you, preparing you like army, going into the streets to help in getting as many people as you can out of the streets. So that's, we are teaching them practice, and that's why I like the book. I refer them all the time to the book. You see all that one man achieved. So at least you pick up something that will help others. That's why you are here, and that's why we are training you. So like you said, it takes a village. So let's see if our educational program, the students will prepare here, they will carry on the work that Bryan Stevenson started.
And real fast too, like when I reflect on my life, I think it's about, giving, our young kids, options. Because if you feel like you don't have options, right, then that necessarily means like your choices are limited. The more options you have, the more choices you can make, right? And so I say all that to say, I remember telling my mom, we went down to Virginia one summer. I think I was about 15. And I just seen how laid back it was. Like, people just moseying on around. Like, it was just, I was like, Dad, can I stay here? Like, I don't want to go back. But I, and I say that I knew at that particular time that, I didn't want to be in North. I didn't want to, be in that violent situation, stuff like that. So the point I'm trying to make is like those outreach programs that take kids like, out, let them see life, like let them see that there's other options, I remember like I used to go to work with my mom, who was a domestic worker. And so we used to, travel up in South Orange and stuff like that. She was like, you see these pretty houses? Like if you work, and things of that nature, like you can be there. So she tried. So, but the point I'm trying to make is, you got to take them out. You have to let them, see different parts of the world. So, they can see that, that hood is not all the end all, be all, because once they start thinking like, this is it, they become in prison. I was in prison before I got the prison system. I really was. And so that, so we have to free, their mindset, from that prison thinking even before they enter incarceration. Because, one of my brothers here, Chino, who runs the Return to Citizens group, and his partner Al Tariq, we always talk about how we was traumatized before we went to prison. And so, and it's the whole thing is trying to unpack that trauma, because prison is a trauma factory, so it compounded our trauma. Fortunately, we rose to our better selves and say, oh, we're going to stop this trauma here. We're going to stop it right here. So I'll stop right there. No, I mean, literally, I'm stopping right there. That's another question.
We're just like looking at each other like
That last comment, Damon and Joe and Alicia, anyone who works in the criminal system might have some perspective on this. It is helpful to hear your perspective about giving people options. And, that raises a question for me, too, about how many of the challenges fueling mass incarceration really are about poor choices versus people being sort of our system incarcerating people to respond to other social problems. And so, Brian's point of we often think of people who commit crimes as the worst of the worst, but the reality is, it's often the poorest among us, the people with mental illness, the people who have been traumatized, and people who need health care and other supports. And so I wonder if anybody has any thoughts about, part of the answer to these very big questions that this discussion is raising is just about how we allocate resources into communities and how we prioritize, helping people versus just criminalizing.
Yeah, one of the issues, Brian Stevenson has a whole chapter in the book about people with mental health issues, and I would say well over 50% of the individuals that we represent across the board with the Office of the Public Defender have mental health issues and/or addiction issues. And I think if you combine mental health and addiction, you're probably dealing with over 75% of individuals that we represent. And the sad part about things in our country is that it's easier to buy a gun in many states than it is to get an appointment with a mental health practitioner if you're poor. And we have so many issues around mental illness. And it was Jenny Brooks Clinic back in 2000 who filed a suit against the New Jersey Department of Corrections because they were not providing proper mental health treatment to individuals, and they were placed in solitary confinement, what they call today administrative segregation. And so you have these individuals, some of them who were suffering from paranoia, schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and other serious psychosis, and they would act out because of their mental health issues. And so they would be punished as a result of the mental health issues and put in solitary confinement. And some of those individuals were in solitary confinement for years if you add it all up. And because of the lawsuit brought by the Seton Hall Clinic, joined by I think a few other firms, they did brilliant work, and there was a settlement agreement. And we had individuals after that settlement who were no longer punished for their mental health issues, but they had mental health practitioners dealing with them to try to get to the causative reasons why they were acting out in prison. So I think as a society, we don't have enough resources, and since the deinstitutionalization of many of our mental institutions, which we fully support in the Office of the Public Defender, but with that comes the necessity for having intensive outpatient services, partial hospitalization programs, individual counseling. And it shouldn't be difficult in the richest country in the world to have such a healthcare crisis where we have so many people living in poverty. And poverty, if you get back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's very difficult to deal with the higher level things if you don't know if you're going to have a next meal, or you're living in a car with your 5 children. And you want to take the children away from that loving parent and penalize that loving parent for their poverty as opposed to getting that loving parent housing. So we have a lot of housing insecurity, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of addiction. And I think the way you prevent a lot of these issues is education, education, education. And I think for the college students, many of whom are appearing virtually here, my advice would be to be a critical thinker, to look at all sides of an argument. That don't get your reality from any news station. Read books and read differing opinions. My father always taught me. My father worked in a state prison for 20 years. He was a correctional officer in a state prison, and that's why I became a public defender, because he often told me, he said, the people that I guard in the prison, it was an Annandale Reformatory back in the 70s, he said most of those individuals are victims of their environment, 95%. He said most of them are decent people. He said the real criminals are on Wall Street, and that was in the early 70s.
Yes.
And boy, was he right. And boy, was he right, you know? But I would say, you know, you need to be a critical thinker. Look at all sides of an issue. If the professor's saying X, think about, do some critical thinking. You don't have to accept everything the professor says.
Yeah.
You don't have to accept everything you read in a book. Read all sides of an issue. And my father was very big as a child. He wasn't a very educated man, but he always wanted me to read the newspapers. And it wasn't just the New York Times, it was the Washington Post, it was the local paper. Read the editorial page, all different viewpoints. Become a critical thinker. The second thing is, get outside of yourself. That's what I would say to young students, especially freshmen. Get outside of yourself. You know, go work at a soup kitchen. Work with people who are disadvantaged. Work with special needs kids. Get outside of yourself, because when you're outside of yourself, you don't focus so much on your own issues. And the last thing I would say to the young students who are watching here and virtually is divorce yourself from your smartphone. Have time to divorce yourself from your iPhone. Your reality is not your iPhone. And today, you know, it's very difficult to get really great child attorneys because no one speaks to one another anymore. Everything's done via text message. People break up on text messages. You know, people get dates on the internet, I'm told, you know, swipe left, swipe right, you know, I don't know. But, you know, you date, you date based upon the internet, okay? You break up via text messages. You need to divorce yourself from your iPhone and really, really be a critical thinker and think about life and think about the essence of life. Think about things like Damon was talking about. Read philosophy, get engaged in existentialism, read theology. And I say, lastly, never forget, and this is a quote from my favorite quote, or one of my favorite quotes from the book. The true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned. And I want you to go back to that first chapter in Just Mercy, which is my favorite chapter. I told Jenny Brooke the other day, where it was not Mr. McMillan. Remember, Mr. McMillan eventually was exonerated, but think of his pain. He was actually innocent. He was actually innocent, right? And remember, Brian Stevenson said in the book that the criminal justice system treats those better who are rich and guilty rather than poor and innocent. Think about that for a moment. But there was the first chapter of the book, which is my favorite chapter, partly because I didn't want to read it again. I apologize, everyone. But the first chapter of the book resonates with me as a public defender because he learned more from his client, okay? He received more from the client than he was able to give to the client. And Brian Stevenson's only job in that first chapter, right, was to go down and tell the client, he was an intern at that point in time at Harvard. He had no idea what he wanted to do with his life, but his only job was to tell the client, you're not going to be put to death within the next year. You're not going to be put to death within the next year. Pause for a second. You're not going to be put to death this year. Okay? And then when this man named Henry was being taken away, shackled in the back, shackled at his feet, with the correction officer pushing him and almost falling, he breaks out in song. He breaks out in song. All right? And he says, he's singing this song. Lord, lift me up and let me stand. By faith in heaven's tableland, a higher plane that I have found, Lord, plant my feet on higher ground. And then Brian Stevenson's back talking, and what does he say? I sat down completely stunned. Henry's voice was filled with desire. I experienced this song as a precious gift. I had come into the prison with such anxiety and fear about his willingness to tolerate my inadequacy. I didn't expect him to be compassionate or generous. I had no right to expect anything from a condemned man on death row. Yet he gave me an astonishing measure of his humanity. In that moment, Henry altered something in my understanding of human potential, redemption, and hopefulness. Like going back to my first meeting with the lifers at East Jersey State Prison, formerly Rawway, right? A prison that was built in the late 1800s, right? I learned more from that meeting than I did in my 2.5 years of law school and my 4 years of college and my 37 years as an attorney and my 18 years as a public defender. I learned more from the lifers than I ever learned in a law book. And that's why we are so grateful to have Damon on board with us, and I hope to get more lifers on board with the Office of the Public Defender, because we learn more from them than we can do.
Now, this is going to sound like fate. I had not intended to tell the story I'm about to tell, but it complements what you just said. I'd like everyone to know that over the last 22 decades, a number of activists within the state of New Jersey actually started, as we understood that the issue, we started our movement to get the state that whenever they planned to build a new prison, that 20% of the space within it had to be dedicated to education and rehabilitation. And once the first prison would have been built, whether that was former Newark State or whatever, we found within 5 to 8 years, they found that they needed more space, and they started occupying the space with bodies, even though it was a state mandated policy. This is what goes on in life. A number of years ago, I got a letter inviting me to give a series of lectures during the month of February. Would you like to guess where it came from? You could get it before anyone else did. It was sent to me by the lifers group at Rollway State Prison. I had to be cleared, they sent it in the summer, so I had to be cleared, get the security clearance to go in and do 4 3-hour lectures once a week from the lifers group. I went in and started delivering my lectures. I sent them the assignments 4 months in advance. I went in every week, and those students are sitting there, these young men, paying attention, taking notes, asking questions. After my second week, I had to stop the class and give them a compliment. I said, I teach at a great university every day. I have absolutely never, ever seen any class as attentive, laser focused, did the assignments, etc., etc., etc. But the lesson I learned from that, I came back to the students and said, perhaps many of you are taking your freedom for granted.
Yeah.
Maybe we should deprive you of something for a little bit. Then you will appreciate the whole series. True story.
Yeah.
What it led me to do from that moment, and I was telling Sister Nancy this the story, you'll sound familiar in a few months. I think this was a few months ago. What I started doing after that was every few years, this is all now pre-COVID, I started taking excursions into the former Newark State Prison, which is now Northern State, and Rollway, Eastern State.
Northern.
East Jersey.
East Jersey now. The only people who were in Rollway were lifers. Absolutely no hope of parole. No help of parole. And what we would do is we would spend 3 hours in the facility. The first hours we would have guards and who would explain how people can make shanks out of the toothbrush. Right. So most of you are saying, what's a shank? I'll say, look it up on your smartphone. But, yeah, there you go. In other words, men learn how to make weapons out of anything, even toilet paper. They could use it to harm someone else. But then after that, the last hour we would spend there after doing a tour, I would want my students to sit in a room with a panel of volunteer speakers, the prisoners, who would want to talk to them and to share their experiences. So I share that with you to say that there are many of us who sometimes have to put our books down and close our eyes and go inside and ask the question, God, what is it you want us to really to do? God calls all of us, as in Jesus' words, to be that point of light on the hill. And heaven knows America needs that point of light. We need lots of points of light now. Because the points of darkness, we're almost about to filter out all of the hope and all the good stuff. Dr. King reminds us also that we should be called together as brothers and sisters to be the beloved community. So we call all of you, students, faculty, administration alike, and allies. We need to become that beloved community right now, right here, forever. Okay. We want to thank you all on behalf of the core program and the Office of the University Provost.
May I have 2 minutes?
Sure.
2 minutes?
Questions?
No, well, Jenny, are we doing questions or no?
If we have some time remaining, we could do some questions.
We still have students in DES, but I just wanted to read from the chat. Damon, when you were talking about, I think it was your mom that you choked up, there is someone in here, Vanita Maloney, and she just wrote, love you, big brother, tearing up. And then we have the chair of the Department of English, College of Art and Sciences, Dr. Angela Weissel, who wrote, I truly appreciate what you say about students needing to see themselves in what they read. And that's an English professor and chair. And it's up to you guys. If you want to open the floor for questions, it's up to Jenny.
Sure.
If there's
But don't offer Damon a job, we need him in the office.
But let me also declare.
Okay, I
Uh,
do.
Maribel, I just want to make sure, I'll say this, because I don't want to forget this. I'd like to put the invitation in right now. I'd like to be the first university that will sanction and sponsor your book signing party.
I'm his agent, you have to go to.
We have a question over there.
Monsignor Renano, Marvin, I will with you in 1 second. Go ahead, Monsignor.
Yeah, this is maybe not, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. This might not be so as important as other things that have been said, but I was just curious, your experience of the prison chaplains. Prison chaplains, were they helpful? Were they helpful?
It was a sister named Elizabeth Nam. I lost my visits. So I had to take a substance abuse course, to get my visits back. They had a zero tolerance policy, right? So they was like, just take the course, and you get your visits back, right? And I was about 26, 27, and so I went to, it was a 12-step program. And so I got involved with the program. It was run by the chaplaincy department, and first 4-6 weeks, didn't pay attention to it, Around about the 10th week, an individual came in and told his story, and it resonated within me. And I was like, wow, it just kind of, shift my whole thinking, hearing this individual's story. Like, he came in and he had a very poignant story, right? And he didn't have to be there, right? So, thank you. So, but I say that to say, I told the sister, I said, at the 12th week, I said, is it, can I come back? I really didn't pay attention, to what's going on. She was like, yeah, no, right? And she was like, yeah, no. She was like, you satisfied the 12 weeks. I'm gonna give you the certificate. She said, but it's an open door policy now that you're here. And so I wound up staying in that program for about 4 years. And it, a lot of things, contributed, to my transformation. But that was a very important one, and it involved, prison justice ministry, because she was a revolutionary. Like, you remember Sis Nan, right? She did not like BS. Like, you come down there, because a lot of individuals, quick story, would utilize the programs to get out the cell, right? And she was cool with that. She would actually reserve some time so you can socialize. But when it was time to get busy, you shut up, right? And if you didn't shut up, Sister Nan was no joke. So so she had garnered the respect of killers, very hard individuals, and she, I think we begin this with, just, whatever you say you're about, be about it in actions, and that's what, she represented, for me. She was like, I still think about her, to this day, but, hope that answers your questions.
I have a
religion-
quick question.
Sure.
I have a quick question. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, I just want to thank you for being so honest and to talk about these very, very sensitive topics, and I applaud you for that.
Real fast, I live by a credo, do something that scares the shit out you every day.
Absolutely.
You know,
I'm
you know,
100%
yeah.
agree with you. Your father, I want to talk about your father.
Absolutely.
101 studies, 1,001 studies have been done that talk about black boys and how they need their fathers. And without their fathers, without that father figure in the house, they have a 80 to 90 more chance of getting caught up in the incarceration system.
Right.
You talk about how your father was there. What do you think was missing? What was the missing piece that allowed you to fall through that time?
My father wasn't much of a talker, right? Very smart man, but he also wasn't very educated. Like technically, he was a contractor. Like he was skilled, you know, mechanics, plumbing, like you name it. Like he was multiply, he had multiple skill sets, you know, with his hands. But he wasn't educated, right? But you know, he was a very, very good father, you know. And, you know, he did his best to, you know, provide for his family, you know, that which he could. Now, I say that, you know, but he, you know, like I said, when he found out that I was getting bullied and stuff like that, it was like, you know, this is a hard world, you know, so he had like a tough love approach. And, you know, looking back on my life, you know, I misinterpreted that. You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, I'm one of 5, and everybody else is, you know, successful and, you know, at a place in their life where, you know, my mom and dad would be, you know, so proud of. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, I had that positive male role model there. It's just that, you know, I, you know, misinterpreted, you know, his, you know, we wasn't communicating. You know what I'm saying? And I took his, you know, his silent approach as well. He don't care about it. You know what I'm saying? So I made excuses for his individual personality. But, you know, I often, you know, talk with my sisters, like, yeah, I remember, you know, talking, you know, Dad in prison. You know, he was telling me, he was like, Dad don't talk. You know, but, you know, he and I, you know, because I was in prison, that was our, you know, only communication. So, so some of my best conversations and wisdom came from a man who, you know.
Thank you.
Okay, Damon, I'm gonna mute Marvin.
Who?
Marvin, and I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Venable?
Okay.
Okay, hold on, let me just. My work study left, so I'm nobody, so please excuse me. Oh my gosh, how do I
It
unmute?
looks like it's
this?
working, Maribel. It looks like he's up.
Marvin?
Yeah, he said, yeah.
Yes, but I have to unmute him, and that's the problem.
Do you want to help him?
I put him in the spot, but he's not
Oh, right up here,
unmuting.
Mike.
No, no, that's
not
mine.
that.
Okay, one of my students is here. Can somebody help me unmute this?
Does anybody,
It's not taking.
I don't know how to,
It's saying,
I always try to help and I always make it worse. With this situation, like Maribel and I, it's like, I always come over to try to help her and then I'm like,
And you listen
clicking the wrong thing.
He's supposed to be here.
Damon, I have another question.
Go ahead while I
Please.
finish this. Allow Mike, hold on, Mildred. Hold on, give me 1 second. Go ahead, Mildred, because
Oh,
it
sure.
didn't.
Albert Woodfox, his book on solitary, he talks about being in solitary confinement for 40 years. And he talked about his mental health, and one of the things that he did as you was read. He focused on.
Was he in Louisiana?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, in Angola.
Yeah, and he also focused on how his thinking and his thoughts were the only things that he could really control. The prison guards could not control that. Very similar to the Holocaust. Why do I forget the name right now?
I think it's good.
You know what I'm talking about.
Don't leave it.
What?
You'll leave it so.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I guess my question to you is, I mean, the prison system, what, 30 years? Correct?
45.
45 years.
35.
35. How do you come out of that with your head still on your shoulders? I'm trying to process that.
No,
I don't
That's a
know.
good-
don't
I get
know.
that a lot.
It's a good.
Are you in therapy right now?
No, but I probably need it. No, seriously, yeah, I do get therapy, but not traditional therapy. As I said, Chino is here, formerly incarcerated person, and he has the Returned Citizen Support Group, which they're popping up all over the country, created by incarcerated individuals for incarcerated individuals. And so it's every Thursday at 6 o'clock, right? And so for me, going there, being around individuals I spent most of my 35 years with. I mean, you have individuals there who have 30 years of imprisonment and went home. I remember them coming into the facility, right? And they leaving before me, right? So we had that connection.
Right.
Me and Chino, we actually went down the same year. So, and we talking about a room full of individuals who've endured, countless years. As I said, we became each other's surrogate family. Now, I say all that to say this. Like first 10 years of my incarceration, I was very violent. I did a lot of lockup time. I think altogether my solitary confinement, my total years in solitary confinement was, I did 5 years in MCU. I did about 2.5 years at SEG, and I did a few months in the hole. So we're talking about close to 8 years in solitary confinement. And let me tell you something. I've always been an individual, like I guess I didn't know any better, like meaning that I would ask like some questions. Like I remember my father and my mother just telling me, like, boy, just shut up. Like I was just, So my point is this. I remember being in the cell one time. I probably was in lockup for about 3 years, right? Solitary confinement. And I kept turning around. I kept looking back. I kept hearing things. Right? Yeah. Oh yeah, it'll weigh on you. But I knew I wasn't crazy, and I knew I was in the cell by myself, right? But you would hear things, you're in a 4x6 cell, and you turn around, and things of that nature. And sometimes, you got that eerie feeling that somebody's breathing on your neck, like they're there, and you turn around. So these things would happen, and so I would, so the days like when we have yard, we were allowed to congregate. I would ask individuals. I was like, man, the other day, I turned around because, it felt like somebody was in my cell. And it was like, yo, you do that too? And so I would be the one to broach these conversations because that was kind of like frowned upon, like, to ask questions about like, you possibly losing your mind, right? So we would have actual discussions in the yard about, what about when you laying on your bed? Like, it's just all these psychotic responses and stuff like that. So that helped me out. It made me become aware of, I guess the psychological effect, the negative psychological effect of incarceration. One of my favorite books is Solitary Confinement by, I think, Lisa Gunther, how they uses Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to argue against the constitutionality of solitary confinement, and how, I think Plummer came up with how prison is a criminogenic environment. I did my BA thesis. I came up with the point. I was like, not only is it a criminogenic environment, it is a psychopathogenic environment because it's actually exacerbating and producing, negative psychological effects, of which your writer experienced. Fortunately, I, got a hold of it, and one of the reasons why I got a hold of it because, fortunately, being an avid reader, and being around Team Work Hard, being around individuals who, listen, we were just a bunch of bad mistakes. That's all it was. We were good kids, for lack of a better, just a bunch of bad mistakes, right? And so I remember, I'm gonna end this here because this is something like is really, really, poignant for me. Like, I think about this every day. I recite it every day since this encounter, that had I reacted badly, I wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
And so it involved a corrections officer. I felt as though he disrespected me, and I was actually, about to, do something really that I shouldn't have did. And so I had a minute to think about it. I was in my cell, and I tell you, I'm saying, the metaphysical is crazy. So we used to have this poem, like we used to challenge each other, like put poems, and who could come up with the best poem. So, what's his name? William Ernest Henley, right? I was so enraged, and I had already committed myself to an act of violence against the state agents, right? The better part of me just said, out of the night that covers me, dark as a pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond his place, a wrath and tears, booms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments to scroll. I'm the master of my fate, I'm the captain of my soul. And so that's about self-jurisdiction. I said, I'm not going to let anybody keep me from reaching my family, moving my, being moved from my better self and stuff like that. So let me stop.
Let me try one more time. Let me try one more time. Marvin, can you try? I tried to unmute you. Can you? Marvin? Marvin, why don't you, I think you put something in the chat. Let me just try to.
Goodness, this is a hard call.
Damon, I know that's not a nice email because I seen the two of them. I'm really sorry.
What?
Let me just read you something really quick.
Come on.
From Marvin. Damon, you are so much more than yourself, your experience. I see your holistic view on not just our community, but America.
Yes.
Now you have Ebony Gilliam, Cousin Damon, I am so proud of you. I know you're still adapting to society, and it can't be easy, especially with all that you have endured. But I want you to know I am rooting for you, and I'm inspired by your integrity and determination to do good in this world, regardless of what they portray you to be at such a young age. Keep up the good work. We need you. Keisha, proud of you, cousin. Love you. Cynthia, Damon, I want you to know that your purpose on this earth is extremely valuable to others. Those behind the wall whom you mentor, and also all of us attending this event, and as well individuals who are outside the prison walls, your parents, family, and friends are very, very proud of you. Stay strong and congratulations. I have more. Neva Akram, I really appreciate you, Damon, for being so vulnerable with us. You truly moved me with your experience and your journey, and I commend you for trying to educate and improve yourself to be able to help others, even after everything you have been through. This will stay with me for years to come. Trinetta, so proud of you, Damon. Congratulations. And I'm really sorry, Marvin. I tried to unmute you, but I couldn't. So sorry. I think I could talk for all our students that have been here. This is an eye-opening. You are amazing. I know your experience has been hard, but you had put us to tears.
I'm at a loss for words right now, and I know a lot of words. Thank you.
Damon, let me just say, you say that your brothers, your siblings are success stories, but I think you forgot to say something else, and that you were a success story.
Yes,
Yeah,
you
you
are.
are. on earth that you went through,
Mhm.
and you're able to come out through that
Yeah.
as a sane human being,
Mhm.
contributing to society with a job,
Yeah.
and I'm sure health benefits and all the rest of it, right? But my point is, you can walk and be an inspiration to other people. I mean, think about, you're not going to see it in this, this is my spiritual belief that when we die, we get to see how our lives affected other people. So think about how your life is going to affect other people. And you don't even know how far it's going to go. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, everything you touched on, like the title of my book is A Beautiful Pain. And the reason why I call it that is, it's a piece of mine I said, I ran from challenges. Now I have a philosophy on life, like bring it, like whatever it is. And so for me, it's a beautiful pain is like, adversity introduces us to ourselves. To say, my prison experience was an adverse situation is definitely an understatement. But what I say from that is that it's through our painful experiences, our ordeals, our sufferings, like that. Once we surmount it, we can, a beautiful poetic can come from that, right? We can reach a self-expression that we probably would never have attained had we not experienced that ordeal, right? So that's why I call it a beautiful pain. So, but no, to your point, like spot on. I totally agree with you on that. I'm my harshest critic. Like everybody tell me, like, oh, you've been home 18 months. I'm not celebrating. Like,
No, you're a success story, there's no doubt about it.
Absolutely,
I appreciate
inspiration,
that.
You're welcome.
inspiration.
I really do.
Our appellate attorneys and our attorneys statewide rely upon Damon on a daily basis for insight into their cases.
Of course.
If I may say, that I know, I call him Sarupa, and I know him, we were both kids, I went to prison when I was 19, and to see the transformation, but this is not changing, this is transformation, right? It's like a caterpillar, once a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, it can't go back.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm really proud. I'm really proud of you, brother, because you only been home 18 months, and you didn't allow that journey to hinder you, or to define, or to limit
Yes.
your possibilities, right? Because even though 35 years of your life were taken away, you gained a lot in those 35 years. And you just starting your journey. You just starting your journey, bro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I want you to know that I'm really proud of you, bro. Just to sit here and listen to you talk, I'm like, oh, man, what's this guy sound like a professor? But it's no surprise to me, because even though you had all that anger, all that rage, and all that confusion, you made sense out of it. You made sense out of it, and now, you're going to be, like the young man over there said, a beacon of light, of hope for our society, because it's very much needed. So I salute you, my brother.
Yeah.
Say something too. I've just been I just, I'm thinking of two things. You mentioned a writer that I really love, Paulo Freire.
Oh, yeah.
And Sister Bosco and I.
Hello?
To me, like, he, like what you've experienced, like, is like exactly what he's talking about in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And, it's like, it's, like there's, education can, it doesn't always, but it can be, like, free, transformative. And that was so beautiful. And then the poem that you read, that was, like, I'm an English professor too, I'm the director of the court, but I'm an English professor and I love poetry, and like, that poem was so beautiful. And it made me think of Dante, because we do Dante, and you mentioned going through Hades, and like when Dante goes through hell, and he goes through purgatory, at the very end, Virgil says to him, I crown and mitre you over yourself.
Right.
And when you read that poem, I thought of that. And And then from that point, he's ready to go into paradise.
Right, right.
You know, it's really so beautiful, and I just wanted to thank you so much.
Also, thank you so much. Touch on a point Tina was saying. I actually, you know, in my book, I actually talk about how, you know, when my mindset started changing, you know, I used to write about that. I think I wrote a poem about that, about, you know, the caterpillar, you know, like, because I looked at prison as my cocoon, you know, but at some point in time, it's like, you know, a caterpillar trapped in this cocoon eventually dies, right?
That's
You know what I'm saying? So the very, you know, regenerative, you know, chamber, you know, that's necessary for his transformation can also be his coffin. Because at one time, I thought that was my coffin. That's why I was walking around like half dead, you know what I'm saying? And so I just want to touch on that. It's like I actually write about that, you know, in my book. I actually write about how I actually started looking at my imprisonment as, you know, my monastery. You know, this is where, you know, I started trying to apply like a monk-like discipline. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, one of my favorite books is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo.
Absolutely.
Right?
I love that. One of my favorite books too.
What did he say about Jean Valjean's change? It wasn't a transformation. It was a transfiguration.
That
Right?
book, I mean,
And
that's.
so,
that's-
and so when I read that, you know, it stopped me. You know, it really just stopped me. And I remember putting the book on my shoulder and just, you know, and just going to sleep on it. Just I couldn't move from there because I'm like, you know, here it is. He wrote about, you know, classism in France in the 1800s, about the mass arrests and things of that nature. Jean Valjean did 20 years, was still on a loaf of bread. You know, and he, you know, right? But when he came home, you see what he did to that city. He became mayor, and it became a thriving, bustling city. But, right? So I say all that to say that that book for me represented, like, I can do that, you know, once I get out. You know what I'm saying? And this is what motivates me. Like, so, you know, to hear people say, you know, you're a success story, you did it, I appreciate it, but I'm not, you know, I'm singularly focused. Like, it's an objective that I have, and it's to my detriment, because I'm actually still living, I'm living like I'm in a cave right now. I really don't get out and have fun and stuff like that, because I'm like, I can have fun and enjoy life later. It's like, I got a mission, I got to do something, I got to put myself in a situation where I can impact as many people as I can.
That's like Jean Valjean, and I mean, and just the thing, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go off on that literature, but you
Yeah,
just, you
it's
like
cool.
mention about
I
the
love
book, you know,
literature.
but like the candles, you know, he steals the candles from the priest, the priest says, I gave them to him, right?
Right.
And then he wants to give that back, like you
Yeah.
mentioned the sister and the, I mean, it's like.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful,
And
yeah.
it was so relatable to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be an amazing college professor, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
But Joe, what's going to be the adjunct?
We've learned so much.
You can do this. You can do this. Anything else?
Yep, Jen Jones was clapping.
Oh, my boy, TJI in the house, y'all.
Do any, before the Reverend closes it, do any of the lifers who were here want to speak at all?
Please.
It's interesting because we very rarely get to hear what others think about our brother. Right? I remember in a class that we took.
I'm sorry, this is part of Teamwork Hard.
Oh, yeah, you know I picked this up, right?
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less. But I remember him saying something in a group. What was it? It was about in the chapel in East Jersey when I first got there. And he said something to the instructor. And he was, you know, he got emotional. When I walked in, there was a bunch of emotions in here. And when I saw Alicia crying, I was like, oh my goodness. But he said something in 2006 that still resonates right now. He said, my brother here and my brothers that's in this room, we grew up together in darkness. and in the most inhumane places, and we still became family. And to listen to you talk about my family like this, right, it's so wonderful. Because, like, you know, and he'll tell you, we don't stop. We don't have time to celebrate. We don't have time to enjoy. It's too much work. Brother Gino, you know, we all, Brother Sean, 60 to life, exonerated, and your school helped exonerate him, Sean Washington.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Right, and Kevin Baker.
Yes.
So, and the thing is that this is very intricate, right, very meaningful. We got lost, but we were determined to be here, even if it was just in these 5 minutes or what we have left. And I want to say thank you. And I don't want to assume that you guys realize it, but when you create spaces like this, you humanize us.
I just have a comment from one of my students, one of my classes, that says, thank you for sharing your experiences. I come from a place which little amount of crime, and I'm blessed with that, but I never really seen anyone who has endured a punishment like that. So this is very eye-opening experience. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, it's like, this is what we do this. So students could see outside the box.
And that's the thing, like, that's what's so, poignant about, Just Mercy and the things that Brian Stevens is doing. Like, as we learn that prisons are hidden, they are hidden in society. I mean, we know about them, right? But we don't, society doesn't know what's like really taking place inside of it. And that's not by happenstance. Like, that they put them in these rural areas, in West Bubba somewhere, right? And so it's strategic, because of the cruelty and inhumanity that's going on within those prisons. Listen, let me tell you something. When we speak about East Jersey State Prison, we say East Jersey State Prison University. Like, we really transform that carceral space into, edifying, existentially enriching, place, and so it just speaks about, the human spirit, under those, conditions, of oppression, repression, inhumanity. Like, it's about never allowing, your space or anybody else to impose upon you your narrative or what you feel about yourself. Like I said, I'm gonna end this with this, like, one thing about existentialism, it says, we are all phenomenal beings. We are value-producing and meaning-producing individuals. Don't take that lightly. Use it. And so, I just, in there.
May I read the last one? Carmelo Ortiz. Proud of you, my brother. Like I have said before, you are the epitome.
Hello?
Okay, is that Marvin? Is that Marvin?
Yes, this is me.
Oh, I did it. I don't know how, but I did it. Go ahead,
God is
Marvin.
in control of it.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
First, I want to state, my brother, I love you very much. And I know your previous circumstances, you were blessed, truly blessed. And we're not going to go into detail, but I need to leave this thought with you. Moving forward, your life is not your own. You have so many people piggybacking and listening to your story. I need you. This is very, very important. I need you to know it's not your own. So move forward cautiously and purposely. I love you, my brother.
Love you too, man.
Okay, David, I have one more.
Go ahead.
And they put the blind leading the blind. I don't know what I'm doing in here, but this is from Carmelo from before. So like I have said before, you are the epitome of transformation, and remorsefulness is evident by the fact that you took advantage of your time in prison to better yourself and the people around you. I am a testament to your goodness and service to others. As I graduated magna cum laude from the School of Criminal Justice at Rutgers, Newark, class of 2020, due in part to your counsel and academic advice. You are an inspiration to me, not because you survived and flourished in an environment that was meant to demoralize you and break your spirit, but because you stood the test of hard time and still managed to smile and help others. Keep up the excellent work that you are doing, my brother. Again, proud of you. Patty, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
Maggie?
Leggy. Damon and Tony, I know you will continue to make the world a better place, especially for those who have been marginalized. Gigantic hats off to Joe Russo and Alicia Hubbard, warriors with the utmost compassion and math skills. Reverend?
I think everything has been said.
This is your second closing.
But no, we'll see each other soon.
Yeah.
That's the best thing I can say. That's the commitment,
Yes.
that's the covenant, and that's going to be the pathway.
Do you want to just lead us with a prayer?
Oh, by all means. Never short of one. But I always remember, I appreciated Dr. King pulling the right scripture in the right moment for the right place and the right audience. This nation needs to be, we don't need another flood, but on the other hand, God said, if you don't get it right, He won't come with water the next time. He will be coming with fire. So we would pray, though, that, as Jesus said on the Mount, blessed are the peacemakers. But blessed are those who can tell the difference between the light and the dark and what's real and what's not real. Empower us, God. Give us the voice, give us the legs, give us the stamina, give us the willpower. Give us the influence, as Damien has stepped into that space. So that we can make this space and every space a better space. We will take back what the devil has stolen, and we will turn it into a place of light, that others will be seeking the light will come forward. We ask this prayer in your name, amen.
Amen. Good night, everybody, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, everybody.